Good afternoon. Welcome to Cohn and Krueger. That's Larry Krueger. I'm Grant Cohn. We're going to be talking today about this rest disadvantage. It's a disadvantage for the Niners. It's an advantage for the Ravens. Are the Niners getting screwed? Does the NFL hate San Francisco? We're going to get into that. But first, I think we need to start with Brandon Aiyuk. He's making cryptic posts on Instagram. There's reports that the Niners and him are still far apart. I think I know where this is going. But then again, I thought he was getting traded. So I'd really like to know where you think this is going, Larry.
I don't get it. I get it from Brandon's perspective, Grant, from the standpoint of why wouldn't you want to wait until after Justin Jefferson and all the other receivers sign? Because every time a new receiver signs, the market gets redefined, and it's almost always going up, up, up. So why wouldn't you? I get why Ayuk's camp says, you know what, we'd like to wait until after everybody signs and then sign. So I get it from their perspective. I just don't get it. How does this benefit the 49ers if they're planning on keeping Brandon Aiyuk to wait for it? They know the price is going up, and if they budgeted, let's just say for the sake of conversation, $23 million a year annually, and he's waiting so it can go from 30 to 35. Well, aren't you? I mean, how does that help the 49ers? And I don't understand what the Niners game plan is here to wait, because waiting costs you more money. The only way waiting works out is if you're somehow going to deal the player. And I don't get it from that perspective either. And I'll say this, if the 49ers trade Brandon Aiyuk for 2025 draft picks, I'm going to say it right now, and I'll do a video on it, and I'll do a live stream on it. It's an epic and utter and complete fail. If they wind up moving a player that is a core player inside their Super Bowl window for draft pick compensation that they won't get until after this upcoming regular season, that's an epic fail. The only way this works is if they sign him, or if they trade him for assets that help them win this year. Otherwise, it's a failure.
All right, let me try to see things from the 49ers perspective, which is what I generally do. Let me try to, because you're coming out real critical, and I respect it. Everything you just said makes sense. So I'm going to try to see this from the Niners perspective.
Yeah.
If they could have traded him for a first-round pick during the draft, they would have, right?
Sure, I would imagine.
Okay, so they couldn't, and he's here. It's possible that they agree with me or people who feel that spending all that money on Brandon Aiyuk isn't wise for them. That it's possible that Brandon and the Niners are just far apart and won't be able to bridge it. And the Niners' solution is, let's keep him, make him play on the fifth-year option, and then franchise tag him, and then trade him for a second-round pick next year. I mean, if the most you were going to get from him was a second-round pick this year, you could keep him, draft a wide receiver in case he holds out, have him one more year at $14 million, which is a freaking bargain, and then trade him for a second-round pick next year, which is the kind of thing the Chiefs do. I mean, they just did it with L'Jarius Sneed. They did it with Dee Ford. What do you think of that?
That could be the only solution. But, here's the thing about that solution. That includes, and you and I are both in this room, that includes basically telling a guy that that's been your number one guy, led you in receptions, your number one offensive weapon. You could make a very compelling argument is Aiyuk. You're going to tell your number one weapon, hey, sit there and shut up and take it. And we'll pay you when we're good and ready and not before. And we'll do it on our terms. And it's not about you. It's about us. That seems more combative than I think they are.
That's a fair point. That's a fair point. The only thing I would say is,
there are any examples of that where they've done that, where they've basically told their guy, hey, just sit there and we'll pay you when we want to pay you? It seems like that would create acrimony.
Well, I mean, I'm sure they've made him an offer. It's not like they're saying to Brandon Aiyuk, look, buddy, we don't want you long term. They've said they want to keep him for his entire career. But if he's dug in at $28, $29, $30 million a year, I would say that they shouldn't give him that. I think that's a mistake. He's a great player, but they don't throw him the ball enough to justify that. So if he wants no less than $28 million a year and the Niners are unwilling to offer more than 24, 25, then what do? Do you just give him what he wants to make him happy? Or do you do what's best for your organization I mean, if he
ball enough, period. Anyway, I mean, that's the other side of that. Do they should they just pay him and throw him the ball more?
Do they have the targets to? I mean, they have to target Kittle, Aiyuk, Debo, Pearsall, Jennings. They run the ball so much. They generally don't pass the ball very much. I just don't know if they have the targets to justify it. They're not that kind of a team. They're not a drop back team. They're a play action passing team. Me personally, I mean, we argued this for months, but I think I made it pretty clear that I was against.
They're run heavy.
Yeah, I mean, I made it pretty clear that I'm against them extending Brandon Aiyuk, and not because I don't think he's great. So if this is what they want to do, keep him one more year at $14 million and trade him for a second round pick next year, I think it's kind of an interesting middle ground. And if it pisses Brandon Aiyuk off, it's business, man. I'm sorry.
It's extreme hardball. Question, I guess the question is this. One of the things that you and I witnessed firsthand, because I know we were standing right next to each other last year, late in the year, when George Kittle said, pay the guy like 24 million, 25 million. I think he might have even said 26 million, something like that. This is a teammate of his that's like politicking in the locker room with the media for the 49ers to pay this player. If they say, you know what? No, he'll operate on the tag and we'll deal with it next year. And if he walks away, we would get a third. So that's all right. We'll see if he can, we'll gamble on him having a big year and we'll try to get a second. In that way, at least they get the year out of him. But the question is, how good is he going to play if you've kind of flipped him the bird as far as the big money long-term deal that he seeks? And most wide receivers in the NFL don't get a second deal. This is like his one big payday. So you're kind of standing between him and one big payday. And he's already kind of taken.
Though it's not that simple, because again, it's not like they didn't offer him something. And what you just said with George Kittle, what was the number he threw out there?
23, 24, 25, 26,
25.
Like
25 was the number we were hearing from play. Pay that man, $25 million man. We heard that from Trent Williams in the locker room. If $25 million a year would get it done, I think they'd be okay. But it's not going to get it done. Amon-Ra St. Brown's getting damn near 30. So that means Aiyuk's going to want damn near 30. And I think that's the problem here. Like, is he worth it on the open market? Yes. Absolutely. You can argue he's better than Amon-Ra St. Brown, but Amon-Ra St. Brown's getting about 150, 60 targets a season. So at least in that offense, they can justify it. Out here, I don't know if they can. I think the Niners probably understand that as well. And that's probably where the impasse comes in. I think it's okay to ask him to play out the fifth-year option. I'm sorry. If you want $30 million a year, you're going to have to wait a year and get it elsewhere. If you want $25 million a year, beautiful. I mean, it's not like it's a hardship for him to accept $25 million a year. If you want the extra money, great. Stand on business, wait a year, and you can get it, but not here.
Yeah. But I mean, what's the impact of that on him, on them, on the room,
that's the
on
question.
His production?
That's the question.
That's you're kind of, you're shaking the dice and you're about to roll them on the table and you're not exactly sure what you're going to get.
Right, because I mean, he's one of your most important players, and now you're making him a complete malcontent. I mean, he could hold out the first 6, 7, 8 games, and then you're really banking on Ricky Pearsall to step up or whatever. I mean, this standoff could really cost the 49ers this season. So again, they have to weigh that. Do they just want everything to be hunky-dory, everything copacetic and happy? Then give him whatever he wants, and then that's your business model. Make your players happy.
Is it possible they've already agreed to some kind of terms and this reporting's erroneous, and that, because the one thing we have seen with the 49ers, and not just the Niners, lots of teams in football, they view every day as a potential risk. So why sign the guy anything more than 24 hours before he's supposed to hit the field?
Fair.
So, I mean, you think the game plan?
With Fowler, I mean, he's with an ESPN guy. He's reporting this. Best guess, where do you think his source is coming from?
I mean, Wagner? I don't know. I mean, Wagner's there embedded in ESPN.
No. My best guess is that his Fowler source is with Aiyuk's camp.
The agent.
Yeah, so probably. Yeah. Hey, I just want you to know it's really no movement over here. Best guess, I think it's probably in Aiyuk's camp's interest to put the pressure on the Niners every few weeks. Remind someone that Aiyuk isn't getting what he wants and he's still unhappy, and that they want to be in the news cycle. So now he's back in the news cycle. Do the Niners want this to be something that people talk about every 2 weeks? Probably not.
Well, and then I've got to wonder, at least as far as what. Okay, so the 49ers knew that let's just say they weren't going any higher than 23, and this guy wanted more, and now and then I think it was Rappaport who said, coming out of wasn't it like the combine, that Rappaport reported that the Aiyuk camp wanted to wait until all the top receivers were signed before they signed. So if they knew that they were offering him 23 and that he wanted 25 and was going to ask for even more when the market reset, then you got to ask yourself, are they making the right decision in how they want to handle this? Wouldn't they have been smarter just moving the player down the road and getting trade compensation, unless there was just no compensation that was even, I don't know what they were offered. Maybe they were offered nothing but a second round pick, because you got to satisfy the contract as well.
If Aiyuk's priority is to get the most money possible and the most targets possible, it may not make sense for him to have his second contract with the Niners. And when asked if he was coming back to the Niners at his locker after the season, what did he say? If it makes sense. He's not. He doesn't have to be here. He seems like his attitude is, if it makes sense. And I totally understand that. And I'm not that smart, but according to my calculations, it doesn't make sense. And so,
it sounds like he's prioritizing. He'd rather get the biggest bag than, I think, all things being equal, if the money's equal everywhere, he'd rather stay, of course. Because the Niners are a good team. But if the money is not equal and there's somebody out there that's willing to pay him the big bag, it sounds like he wants the big bag over staying, and that he's prioritized that, and that he's spoken that reality to the Niners through his agent.
Yep. So if that means that he has to grin and bear it, making a mere $14 million on the 5th-year option this year, well, you know what? That's the price of you eventually getting $30+ million a year and maybe winning a Super Bowl on the way out. So yeah, you might be really pissed, but people have had it tougher. They might be able to work it out. Although it will be really interesting. Who am I to tell Brandon Aiyuk how to feel about it? And this could be a really big storyline that actually impacts the season.
Well, how would you evaluate if your guess is the way it's being handled and you're spot on? Then how I'd be very critical of the 49ers. You're telling me that your best plan is to tell your star wide receiver, we're not taking care of you, just sit there, and then hope that he, shows up enough. He's going to show up eventually to get paid, but doesn't hold out, doesn't derail your season, doesn't make himself an island unto himself in the locker room, doesn't, suddenly have, issuing these cryptic statements and emojis and all this stuff that can poison an NFL locker room. I mean, they're willing to risk all of that to save a couple $1 million on the contract.
Great question. I think it's a wonderful question. Is it worth it? That's not really the question, though. The question is, would the Niners do it? And look at what happened with Buckner. Buckner wanted at least $20 million a year, more like 21, and he got it from Indianapolis. The Niners seemed to say no on principle. They were willing to offer what they gave Eric Armstead $18 million a year. So it seems like the Niners, and they seem to value Buckner and Armstead similarly. So it seems like the Niners and Buckner were about $3 million apart, and they ultimately traded him. If the Niners are willing to pay Aiyuk $25 million a year, which is the number that Trent Williams and George Kittle threw out there, but Aiyuk won't settle for less than 28, what's going to happen? Well, history suggests that the Niners might not budge on this one. They may not meet the player where he wants just to appease a 25-year-old athlete, 26.
Yeah. And yet, with Buckner, that was not the right decision. I mean,
good point.
To me, you never move off of guys that command double teams on your defensive front seven. He did, and they did, and they, I mean, if they had kept Buckner, they probably get back to the Super Bowl faster than 4 years is what it took them to get back there.
Frankly, it's a lot tougher to find a 6'8" D tackle who's good against the run and pass like Buckner than wide receivers.
Yeah. Well, and then the other thing is, the wide receiver room. I don't mind Ricky Pearsall as a player, but if you're telling me he's the replacement for Aiyuk, now I'm skeptical.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying I think Pearsall is the replacement for Jawan Jennings. Aiyuk's going to be here for another year, and if he leaves next year and they trade him for a second-round pick, they could draft a wide receiver in round 1 again next year.
Yeah.
They really could.
I mean, and they're loaded at wide receiver this year. I mean, they're I mean, they're only going to keep 5, maybe 6. They've got about 9 or maybe even more. They got about 10 or 11 wide receivers that are NFL caliber. So I don't know. What do you think's going to happen this summer? Do you think
that's the question. Do
you think
he'll be there tomorrow?
Not going to show up? No, he's not going to be there tomorrow. No way. But is he going to be there camp?
I think he may show up to camp, but I don't think he'll practice without a new contract. That's my best guess. And would he miss games this year? Maybe. It would cost him a lot of money.
This is not a wide receiver. Your number one wide receiver inside your Super Bowl year is not a guy that you want holding out. Now, if Nick Bosa wants to hold out and he's playing defensive end in a wide 9, simplistic, get up the field, sack the quarterback scheme, you can live with it. But a guy who's supposed to be locked in to your very complex offense with your quarterback who doesn't take any reps all summer, that's not only less than ideal, that's almost borderline malpractice on the season.
Sure. But if you were preparing to play hardball with Brandon Aiyuk and really dig in at $25 million a year, and you're expecting him to dig in at 28 or whatever, wouldn't you draft a wide receiver in round 1 just in case things went sideways?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, like, when they made that pick, a lot of people, me included, were like, how can you do this? How can you draft a 4th receiver on your depth chart or a guy who replaces someone next year? Well, you don't really know what their plan is for Brandon Aiyuk, and they may be bracing for something messy with Aiyuk, in which case they need to cover their ass.
And I think it's also worth adding that there are a lot of people, myself included, that were kind of critical because they took Pearsall over guys that I at least viewed as higher upside, right?
Mitchell,
Xavier Legette. But you know what? If you told me that the real factor that was the most important was you need to draft a receiver, and you need to draft a receiver that could potentially play huge snaps for you this year, I might take Pearsall over those guys too. Because there's one thing that Pearsall has that those guys don't have is he's polished.
Right.
He's ready. He's more of a finished.
That's what I didn't get about the pick. It's like, hold on, you drafted a 23-year-old wide receiver who turns 24 this year, and he's for 2025. Make that make sense. Well, he may not be for 2025. He may need to play a lot this year, or at least early on, or in training camp. Who knows? And if he has a great training camp, if he looks like Brandon Aiyuk out there, all of a sudden the Niners can play even harder ball with Brandon.
Hey, here's the question I would have. Here's the other question I would have, Grant, is if they are planning on playing hardball, and either, he very easily could at some point this summer demand a trade, which he hasn't done publicly, and then maybe you're trading Brandon Aiyuk in camp, and it's like, if you're getting 2025 draft picks, I don't think that's going to fly. I almost feel like you'd have to, like, if the Raiders came calling, the Raiders now have Harrison Bryant, they have, Michael Mayer, and they have Brock Bowers. The Niners are thin at tight end. They said, I got to have the receiver, I'll give you a pick, but I want one of those tight ends that can help me this year. I'm just saying, it's like, if you move Aiyuk and you don't get an asset that can help you this year, man, I mean, there's going to be an awful lot of people questioning why you didn't pull the trigger on draft.
And that's why they're not going to do it. Like, they're not going to trade Aiyuk and make themselves worse. And so that's why Aiyuk's in a tough spot. Like, are they going to make Aiyuk happy just to make him happy? Doesn't seem like it. But are they going to trade him just to get rid of it? Like, get rid of a distraction? Doesn't look like it. It looks like they want to have the best roster possible. Feelings be damned. And if he wants to play games, they got Ricky Pearsall just in case. So that's
extreme hardball.
Yeah, it is. And we haven't really seen them work that way, but they're kind of desperate. Like, this is the last year of this particular Super Bowl window. It's the last year that Brock Purdy's making no money, and soon he's going to be making all the money, and they're going to have to drastically change their team. And I think they're going to do what they have to do this year to win the Super Bowl.
It's really interesting. It's interesting on a lot of fronts. The one that's really interesting is if of all the positions on the football team currently, if you said to me, what spot do they have an abundance of riches and depth? It's wide receiver. They've got guys. There's no spot on this team for Chris Conley, for Trent Taylor,
Ronnie Bell,
Dave Martin, for Ronnie Bell.
Yeah.
There's no
number
jobs available for any of those guys. They have 11 receivers. They're probably going to go with 5, We know the first 3, and then they just drafted Cowing and Pearsall, so that's 4 and that's 5. So that means all these other guys are just going bye-bye.
Ronnie Bell is here to stay. I love Ronnie Bell. Don't you say that.
He might be their best ball. He might have the best ball skills of any of the receivers, including Aiyuk, JJ, all of them.
I like Ronnie. Honestly, if Brandon Aiyuk misses time, I'm going to have to be convinced that Ricky Pearsall is a better option than Ronnie Bell at receiver. Ronnie Bell as a punt returner is a damn shame. I'm sorry, Ronnie.
Ronnie Bell's got great hands. His dad is a college football wide receiver coach. Tough. He's really advanced.
Yeah.
But right now, he's probably looking at either getting traded or cut. So it makes you wonder. It makes you wonder if if maybe the Niners are going to play super hardball with Aiyuk if he holds out, and let him hold out and just say, hey, we'll replace you from within and you'll be back. Because doesn't he have to play by a certain week to get paid anything? Right?
Accrued season. Yeah. It probably has to play more than half the season.
Yeah. So he'd hold out and then, but I mean, that potentially could be, just
what
the
a dark
biggest
cloud hanging over a season.
Yeah. That could be the biggest negative
Is that
story.
really what you want? Yeah.
Not what you want at all, but
it's not
we'll see what kind of hardball they're going to play.
Petey Boy says, I agree with both you guys, to be honest. I'd mostly do 27. He's great, but but we don't have the money. I'd put more in guarantees and roll with it. Garendo. Okay. Let's talk about this rest disadvantage. Warren Sharp brought it up, and I respect him very much. He doesn't have a bias. When I first heard it, it felt like 49ers fan whining, but it is an interesting statistic. Why don't you explain it to the people who don't know what this is?
Well, I mean, okay, so Warren Sharp writes, I think, the most interesting article of the year. The schedule comes out. He takes 24 hours, 48 hours, and then he puts out kind of his evaluation of the schedule. And he goes through all the little nooks and crannies and looks for the inequities. And what's the article that he wrote this week is absolutely stunning in that he kind of is painting the picture that the NFL is giving lip service to caring about players and rest and their bodies while really looking the other way and taking every good matchup they can possibly find and rest inequities be damned. I mean, and basically what it shakes out at is the 49ers for the second consecutive year have the most rest disadvantage of any team in pro football 2 years in a row. Last year they were minus 20. This year they're minus 21. The Ravens by comparison are like plus 16 or plus 17. So in a sport that's 4 months long sport, the Ravens have a rest advantage disparity with the 49ers that is greater than a month. They have a 37-day rest advantage. And that means they have 37 more rest days combined over the course of the season than their opponents do. The Niners are minus 22. Minus 22 for the Niners, plus 17 for the Ravens. So in a sport that goes on for 4 months, they have over a month, almost 5 full weeks of extra rest. So you can sit there and say, and I've heard people say, shut up, it's not that big a deal. Not only is it a big deal, but what Sharp outlines is that it's becoming a bigger deal every year. This is 3 years in a row now where the disparity between the most rest advantage and the most rest disadvantage teams has grown significantly. It was like 20 days, and then it was 25 days. Now it's 30 days. Now it's 37 days. Well, 37 days. I mean, heck, I did quality control. You call yourself quality control. Those are the people that put together the game plans. If you give the 49ers got destroyed last year in which game? The Cincinnati game. In that game, Cincinnati rolled in with a decided rest advantage. And the 49ers had a rest disadvantage in that game, and it really showed. They absolutely got their doors blown off. Kansas City last year, Sharp breaks it down. In the games where they had a rest disadvantage, there was 5 games. They went 2-3, and they only covered one of the games as far as the point spread. In the rest of their games, they went like 13-2 and covered at like 85%. So The rest is a major factor in the NFL, and it was only a couple of years ago that like they were really more conscious and aware and a little bit more discerning in how they went about things. Now with all their new TV partners, they just want to satisfy their TV partners so much so that this rest disparity has gotten out of hand to the point where now the Ravens have 37 more days of rest than the Niners in a sport whose regular season spans 4 months.
Yeah,
so
but the way you
it's
say
pretty
it,
significant.
the way you say it, it makes it seem like the Niners have like a shorter schedule, but this only affects them in a few games. Like they have 4 games against opponents who are coming off bye weeks. That sucks. It's not ideal. Obviously not. I mean, but it's the regular season. It's going to happen. You're going to have some games against teams who are coming off a bye week. And
well, not all. That's the point. There are like 16 teams in the NFL that don't play any games against teams coming off bye weeks, and the Niners have 4.
Well, okay, and there are some teams in the NFL that have to play 3 consecutive road games. There are some teams in the NFL that have to go play in London or
but the
Germany.
Niners do have the most. They have a record number. They have 8 games total out of 17 where they are at a rest disadvantage, and there are many teams that have no games that they're at a rest disadvantage.
Okay, Larry, you made a great point. How many games do you have the Niners winning this year?
I said 11-6.
Okay, so you think they're going to be good?
I think they're going to be good, but here's the thing, Grant. I did that before I looked at the rest breakdown. So now that if I went and looked at the rest breakdown and saw where they have, dramatically less rest than the team they're going against, I may want to change it around because last year, for example, I thought, man, maybe the Niners, the Cincinnati won't be that bad of a game. Well, when you see that they were like minus 13 days of rest because Cincy was off a bye and off a Thursday night game, and the Niners were coming out of Minnesota on a short week traveling home, that was an absolute scheduled defeat. And the Niners didn't just get defeated, they got absolutely destroyed. So
all I can say is that sometimes there are scheduled defeats in the regular season. It's the way it goes. And what's interesting about the Niners is they do actually ask for accommodations with the league. If you notice in September, they either play on the road or at night because their Levi Stadium can't handle the sun in September in Santa Clara. So the league does a pretty good job of accommodating them. They don't give them 3 road games back to back. They don't give them home games in the sun in September. They didn't have to go to London this year, which would have made, they already have the 5th most miles they have to travel this year. They would have been closer to number 1. So does it suck? Yeah, it kind of sucks. Does it suck that it happened 2 years in a row? Yeah. There was a number 1 seed in the NFC last year. It really, maybe it's the reason they lost to Cleveland by 2 points, but you know what? They overcame it and they still were the number 1 seed. And we both expect them are going to win 11 games. So it's something to talk about. But I think if you look last year, the teams with the biggest rest disadvantages all made the playoffs, and the teams with the biggest rest advantages all missed. So it's hard to say how much it really impacts a team over an 18-game schedule.
Well, you know what it does? You know what it's really clear is that part of the reason that the teams that get more rest make the playoffs is because less rest make the playoffs. Is the teams that are getting less rest because the league is putting them in primetime windows and cashing checks. So that's really it.
Is that so? Would the Niners rather be like if they could have it their way? They say, look, we got 6 primetime games this season. Thank you. It's flattering. I know everyone wants to watch us play football and stuff, but this isn't unfair. Like, we'll just play our little 1:00 games and you can catch up with us in the playoffs. Like, I don't think they want that. So if you want to be a marquee franchise, and this is, I guess, part of the price.
I mean, it's all the greater good, right? There's revenue sharing. So the leagues have a vested interest in getting the biggest, the players and the owners are tied together. They're just, they are all intent on getting as much revenue as possible. But we're talking about a sport that is growing. The economic pie for the NFL is probably the healthiest pie that exists in any industry in America. I mean, we've seen this pie go from like 14 billion to 25 billion in like less than 7 years. It's almost unprecedented growth. But this is the price that you pay. So I just don't want to hear any more talk about how the NFL cares about the players and cares about the teams. And think about it, how absurd some of these things are, Grant. It's like, if Brock Purdy wants to come into the facility one day before the NFL rules, no, we can't have Brock Purdy in the Niner facility in the offseason. Why? Because in the sense of fairness, we need to mandate that everybody can only spend so much time preparing and practicing and all. So in some ways, they care intently about all these little tiny minutia things that add up to fairness, while totally ignoring, something that is a major staple of fairness. Like, hey, by the way, you have 6 days to prepare for that game and they have 12, right. So it just kind of shows that when push really comes to shove, they're prioritizing their money. And not only are they people say, well, why are you talking about this now? Because it's actually getting worse, because the numbers, if you read that Warren Sharp article, it will show you that the NFL used to care a little bit more about player safety, at least the way the schedule, as it pertained to the schedule. Now they've just thrown that all out the window, and it's just like, you know what? Who cares if the Niners are getting screwed? We're getting the biggest check, and they're getting their 1/32 of it.
I don't really see this as a player safety issue. I see this more as in 4 games, the Niners have to face a team that will be more prepared for the game than them, have more rest than them. So it's not that the Niners are going to be like dog tired and on the risk of getting hurt. It's just that they're going to have a team that's fresh, that has a great game plan to face them 4 times. And yeah, that's the kind of thing. It's the kind of imbalance you wouldn't see in the playoffs. It doesn't happen in the playoffs, but it happens in the regular season. Should it happen to the Niners the most 2 years in a row? Probably not. But if they are the number 1 seed again, I think the NFL is going to be like, see, it doesn't matter. So if this really does impact their season, and this is the reason that they missed the playoffs, I bet the NFL will fix it. But I think they're looking at it right now and being like, is this an issue? We do the best we can for you. We don't send you to London. We don't give you 3 road games back to back. You don't want to be at home in September. We work that out with you. Like, now you're saying that we're screwing you over here because this team has a bye week before they play you and this team has a bye week. Like, sorry.
I don't know, man. I know what you're saying, but here, think about it this way. Kyle Shanahan made the point late last year when the Niners were going for the number 1 seed that the rest meant more than the home field. Mm-hmm. So if we're battling for the regular season and it's all about getting the 1 week off, you're playing your gift for winning and having the best record is the extra rest. So it is kind of ironic that they value rest and where everybody's playing for 1 week of rest. And yet the Ravens will have
how do you
5
fix this?
Weeks of extra rest.
As quality control for the league, Larry, how do you fix this? Do you say there's a rule where you can only face 2 teams a season coming off a bye week, 3 teams a season coming off? Like, it seems tough to make the schedule just fair across the board. I mean, there'd be all kind of things the Niners would have to play some home games in September. Why should they have to avoid the heat when they freaking built their stadium there? Like, that's your fault.
Sure.
Your fault.
And I don't know how many teams have special requests and this and that for how, when they play and when they don't play and so on and so forth. But I mean, I just think that it's one of those things where in a lot of factors you can say, well, you know what, over the course of the long haul, it evens out. But this doesn't. What if the Miami Dolphins were like, hey, league office, it's really hot in South Florida in September. Can we not play? Like, it's only hot in Santa Clara in September. And the league is like, we totally understand. We're going to let you guys play at home at night and on the road. Wow. And now you want to talk about getting screwed over? I don't know, man. I don't know. I think you might just have to grin and bear this one. No, I hear you. It sounds like nitpicking, but is it really nitpicking when a season is 4 months long and one team has 37 extra days?
Do you know off the top of your head which teams have the extra rest against the Niners? It's the Chiefs, the Cowboys, and there's 2 more,
Chiefs,
right?
The Cowboys, the Seahawks, and I think the Cardinals.
Okay, so the Niners are going to win 3 of those games. It's not an issue. If they lose to the Cardinals, then we could talk about it.
Yeah, but I mean, I would just say this, that over the course of the long season, it does start to matter.
Dallas could have a year and a half to prepare for the 49ers. They're not going to win that game.
Sure. But I mean, you're competing with the Ravens to win the Super Bowl. And it could easily be Niners Ravens on Super Bowl Sunday in New Orleans in February. And, that's going to be interesting as we sit there and go, well, you know what? The Ravens actually had 37 extra rest days compared to the 49ers this year. I mean, that's major.
In February, but if they play in the Super Bowl, they both will have had 2 weeks to rest. They'll be extra rested.
Recently. But I mean, it's just the other thing too. It's like if you wind up, the Chiefs went 2-3 in the games that they had less rest, and 13-2 in the games they didn't have less rest. So it's obviously a factor if you just look at the Chiefs. Well, what if all of a sudden you're playing players late in the year that you normally could rest and sit out because the games matter, because the rest disparity was even the playing field and made it so that you needed to play hard in week 16, 17, and 18 to just make the playoffs, and now you lose somebody. So, I mean, it's like we could play the game back and forth. There's any number of factors. All I would say is if it evens out, and it doesn't have to even out every year, but I think there should be some mechanism in there where they know, let's say within a 5-year window, is this evening out? Is this evening out? And if it isn't evening out, then you've got, the 49ers annually playing a tougher schedule, which means that there's a sense of fairness that's lost there, I think.
Let me say something. If this were the Jacksonville Jaguars, who had the worst rest disparity in the league 2 years in a row, no one would give a fuck. It's an issue because it's an issue. I'm sorry. I no one would care if it was happening to the Houston Texans, the Jacksonville Jaguars, the Tennessee Titans. It's an issue because it's happening to the Niners.
Well, it's an issue with me because it's happening with the Niners. But I mean, it's not that complicated. I mean, rest is a major part. Like rest in baseball doesn't help you.
It's not that complicated in the sense that you think it's an issue. I don't, and we both have them going 11-6. So I think we could move on to another topic now.
Okay. But I'm just saying that everybody, whoever's going to be on the short end of the rest, should be complaining. And it's not that the league's out to get you. It's just that the league has prioritized cash and greenbacks over scheduling, equality, let's just say.
My heart breaks for the 49ers. Blood Moon says, how the fuck would we hang on to Gray over Bell? That won't happen. Because Bell's actually good. Blood Moon says, Larry, don't forget Purdy was concussed, rushed back. What are you talking about? Game Time says, my opinion, that's not a chain, it's a necklace, Grant. That's fair. Ricky Williams says, rest is a huge factor, dude. This team continues to go deep in the playoffs every year. At the same time, they're aging. Every day counts, honestly. You know what we should do? We should write a letter. We should write a letter to the league, and I'll sign it, and just say we are highly disappointed in your actions. I'm sorry, I'm being silly, but what are we going to do?
It's possible that the 49ers have reached out to the league, and it's also possible that the 49ers have said to themselves, all
right. No. We got to stop. I can't do it. The rest is fantasy. I want to talk about Samuel Womack. We got to talk about Samuel Womack. Let's talk about Samuel Womack. Is it possible that he's going to be the Nickelback on this team? Sorensen brought him up. You were there. Someone was asking about who's the Nickelback going to be. He's like, well, Samuel Womack's looking really good. It seems like they don't want to play Lenore inside. They did that last year as sort of like a last resort when Isaiah Oliver crashed and burned. But it seems like they signed Oliver because they want someone to play that position full time. What do you think Womack's chances are of winning that job?
I like Womack a lot. He said that Womack and somebody named Keeman Hall, I believe, were getting some run at the nickel spot. I mean, this is one of the debate questions. I mean, I would say you got three corners. You got Lenore, Mooney, and maybe Renardo Green, let's say, as your starters. That means you got 6 other guys there, 5 or 6 other corners battling for, maybe a couple spots. Maybe you most teams keep 5 corners. Maybe you might keep a 6th. So, I mean, they've got, Rock Ya-Sin and Darrell Luter and Sam Womack and Ambry Thomas. And, all these guys are battling for the 4th and 5th spot. And one of those spots could be the starter at the nickel. I think Womack, to me, last year in camp looked fantastic. I thought he looked every bit as good in camp last year as Lenore looked, and then Lenore went on and had a monster year, and Womack was like unheard of. Like, with about 7-8 weeks left to play, he couldn't never get on the field again, and it was like they didn't trust him. So I'm not sure what to say about it, to be honest. I think Womack's got size. He's got enough speed. He's strong enough. He can play the slot and deal with that two-way break. He can also play outside. I really like him. I think he's an NFL corner for sure. And if they cut him, I'm convinced that he'll go somewhere else and play well. So he's in the mix. I don't know if he's going to get it, but he's in the mix for it.
Yeah, I think the question is, are they better off with Lenore inside and Isaac Yadam on the outside, or Lenore just staying outside and someone playing in the slot? They drafted Green. They said he was going to play in the slot, but when we asked Sorensen who else is there, we asked him about Green, he immediately went to Womack. Well, Womack's been playing in the slot. He's doing good. And then he brought up other people too. When I've watched Womack, I feel like he was better in the slot than he was outside. And I feel like he is pretty good in man-to-man coverage. He seems like he doesn't give up a lot of separation. He just seems like he's giving up catches when he's right there. So I don't know if he can turn and find the ball, but it seems like his coverage is almost too good. Sometimes it seems like he's going to get flagged.
He's got to be more competitive at the catch point. His coverage, he's blanketing guys. He's mirroring these receivers up and down the field, but he's got to show a little bit more ability to make a play on the football at the catch point. It seems like how many balls did we watch early last year where he was right there? Like the coverage was textbook, and yet it was still completed.
So maybe if he can, I don't know if you can figure that out at this point in his career, but if he can, he could be their starting nickel. I got a question about hierarchy. Who is higher ranked on this coaching staff? Nick Sorensen, Brandon Staley, defensive coordinator, assistant head coach.
I think it's Staley. I think Staley's the reason that they have Leonard Floyd. I think his advice was heeded to in free agency. I get the sense that, that the players didn't, they wanted Sorensen a year ago, but they went with Wilkes internally. So now they felt like they owed it to their players. I asked Sorensen directly, why did you get this job? He said, ask Shanahan and Lynch. And I'm like, well, I'm asking you. And he said, my proximity to the room, my knowledge of the defense, my knowledge of the personnel. He's like, he thinks all those things. So he was there, and he was a guy I'm sure the players wanted, but he's a first-time guy, and I get the feeling, maybe I'm wrong. I mean, we have no idea what Brandon Staley's role is going to be. He described it as holistic, which means what? He can do anything at any time.
Yeah.
I'm not really sure. Staley is the guy who was celebrated as a great coordinator, who has been a disappointment as a head coach. The other guy, Sorensen, is viewed as a player, as a coach that the players like, but he's never been a coordinator ever. So you got a first-year coordinator against a guy who's deemed to be a great coordinator, but just wasn't a great head coach. So I got to think Staley's higher up on the masthead, and that he's there as almost an insurance policy against Sorensen, being disappointing, or the defense being disappointing. And it seems like maybe Staley's the pivot point if things don't go smoothly.
Well, I mean, it does seem like he had a big influence on free agency. And it does, Sorensen even said that Staley's going to be helping with the game plan. So in that sense, it seems like he's kind of the architect of the defense, picking the players, putting together the plan each week. But then Sorensen calls the plays. And I think this is an interesting division of power, because ultimately the person who calls the plays seems to have the final word on what's going to happen. And if the Niners lose a game and the defense doesn't play well, who takes responsibility for it? Is it the play caller or the game plan designer? Is Sorensen going to go midweek and be like, well, that's a better question for Staley? Or, that could be really interesting. If they win all the games, the defense is great, no one's going to ask questions. It'll be easy. But wait for that one game when the defense doesn't play well and they lose. Who's really taking responsibility for what happened? Well, anyway.
And I think the run D, think of it this way. The run D was bad last year. Then they lost Armstead, their best defensive lineman against the run. Greenlaw, their best linebacker against the run. And Hafanga's most likely not going to start the year healthy. He might be their best defensive back against the run. So you weren't good against the run last year, and you just lost your 3 best run defenders on all 3 levels of your defense. And I asked him about the run D and why the run D took a back step last year, and he just didn't answer the question. And then I pointed out that they got run on by Detroit, and he's like, yeah, well, we looked at that film and we've made those adjustments. But once again, not really specific. So we'll see. I don't think based on just what I said there, I don't expect them to be lights out against the run this year. No Greenlaw, no Armstead, and no Hufanga, but they're going to be really good against the run. So if they're bad against the run, who's going to get blamed?
You. Quality control.
Seriously, because who's going to get blamed? Because that's, if you ask me, I asked Shanahan at the end of preseason, said, you get gashed in the run game. Are you concerned? He's like, well, I would be if it was based on, if I thought our run D was what the run D we had in the preseason, but we had a really good run D last year. Yeah, but nobody, then he didn't mention the fact that last year you had Ridgeway and you had Aziz and you had Ebukam and you had Jimmy Ward and you had Emmanuel Mosley. Literally 5 guys that you got rid of to go get Hargrave, and suddenly it's like, hey, you know what? You lost 5 good run defenders and picked up an interior pass rushing tackle, and shocker, you're not as good against the run. It was a total personnel thing, and I just kind of wonder what it's going to look like this year.
I got another question for you. Do you think Brandon Allen can beat out Josh Dobbs as the number 2 quarterback?
I do. I like the way Josh Dobbs looked against Dallas, and I like the way Dobbs played when they came to Levi's. The Cardinals did early in the year, but I saw Dobbs late in the year against Chicago. He was horrible. So yeah, I think Brandon Allen definitely knows this offense better, and I think Brandon Allen could be the number 2. Wouldn't shock me at all. I don't think. Just look at the money that they paid Darnold and look at the money they're paying Dobbs. They're paying Dobbs about half as much as they paid Darnold. So, maybe they look at Dobbs as a nice option, but I don't think, if Brandon Allen outplays him in the preseason, I think Brandon Allen will be number 2.
I think elevating Allen beyond Dobbs would be a huge mistake. And I wouldn't be surprised if they do it, because Kyle Shanahan seems to make his mind up before these things happen. Like picking Sam Darnold over Trey Lance last year, that was a predetermined decision. So maybe Kyle Shanahan prefers Brandon Allen, but I think Josh Dobbs is interesting in the sense that you're very harsh on Josh Dobbs because he had that one bad game where he threw 4 picks against Chicago. Purdy had a game where he threw 4 picks last year. I think it's a little unfair to just write a guy off for one game. He was 2-2 as a starter with the Vikings. Cousins was 4-4 with the Vikings. So It seems like on a team this good, he might be able to win some games. If Brandon Allen ever wins more than one game in a season, I'd be shocked. Brandon Allen.
I hear you. I'm not anti-Dobbs. That game that he threw 4 picks, he probably could have thrown 6. He was horrible that day, but it was one game. He looked great against the Niners at Levi's in week 3 or whatever it was. He looked really good beating Dallas when they pulled the upset. Was it the week before? So, Dobbs, and we know Dobbs is athletic. We know Dobbs is really smart. So maybe it's a slam dunk, but they are paying him half as much as they paid Darnold. So my guess is that if Allen outplays him, that maybe Allen could take that job.
What's funny is I actually think there's a better chance of Allen getting cut than being the number 2 quarterback. I'm interested to see what can Tanner Mordecai do compared to Brandon Allen. Like, who's really better? Because to me, what Brandon Allen brings to the table is all like coach stuff. He's in his 30s. He's great in the meeting room. But if he actually had to play football, I might rather see Tanner Mordecai out there and his 4.5 40. And I don't know. So that's kind of what I want to see. Like, is Brandon Allen really good enough to be on this team, or is he going to be the quarterback coach in 5 years when he's retired and Brian Griese is an offensive coordinator somewhere else?
I'm with you as far as I'm not I'm not pro Allen. I think there's a very good chance that Mordecai could beat out Allen. But I'll say this: the only thing I think that's said about the Niner quarterback room is that Brock's number one, and after that, I think it's we'll see. We'll see what they look like in practice. We'll see what they look like in the preseason. I think in an ideal world, it's Dobbs 2, Allen 3. But if you told me that Mordecai beat out Allen, that wouldn't shock me. If you told me that Allen beat out Dobbs, that wouldn't shock me. I
Dobbs
just think
last year in Minnesota went 20 of 30 in relief in a win over Atlanta. And then the next week he beat New Orleans with 23 of 34 for 268 yards and a touchdown. Then he lost to Denver. Then he lost to Chicago. Then he beat the Raiders 3-0 with 63 yards passing. So,
wow.
Do you want Josh Dobbs for more than a month? Probably not. But do you want Brandon Allen for more than a play? That's to be determined. We'll have to see. And Brandon, if you're watching, I'm a big fan. Really hope you do well this year. Final question. What is the 49ers' number one concern heading into the season?
Well, I think some people would say, I think I've heard, who's the free safety, who's the number 2 tight end, but I think most people would say it's how good is their offensive line from center through the right side, right guard, right tackle, and center. And but my thing would be definitely the run defense, because as I said, your run D last year wasn't good. And Greenlaw and Warner made everything go for the most part. And the Niners offense, camouflaged that weakness because they scored 30 points a lot with Purdy. So New York game second half, they weren't running. Pittsburgh game second half, they weren't running. Dallas game second half, they weren't running. Cardinal game second half, they weren't running. So their offense took away a lot of teams running, in the second half. I think it's the run D. I think it's the run defense. And, we'll see. We'll see. Is Devondre Campbell going to step in for Greenlaw? Is that going to make an impact? Do they have any defensive tackles up front that can plug the run? Do they set the edge on the corner better than they used to? Do they come firing up in the secondary at safety the way they did under Tart and Ward now with the guys they have? So to me, it's run D. It's their run D, because it's also teams will do an autopsy on the year and they'll see, you know what? These teams, the teams that tried to stay stuck to the run, ran the ball well on the Niners, including Green Bay, Detroit, and Kansas City. Let's just stick to the run. And I think teams didn't do that enough last year.
I wonder if Aaron Rodgers will allow the Jets to do that week 1. Because I think like Robert Saleh would know what to do, but Aaron Rodgers is a play call on that team, no? Essentially.
Well, they have Breece Hall. They got a tremendous back, and they've got Izzy Abanaconda, who's pretty decent back. So they got some good backs. Really good. If they want to, if they want to run it, they could.
Their number one concern on defense for sure is their run defense. I think overall, though, I think it's their offensive line. In the Super Bowl, their run defense wasn't bad. Like, effort was an issue for them last year, but in the Super Bowl, effort wasn't an issue, and they did a pretty good job holding Isaiah Pacheco in check. But why did they average 3.5 yards per carry on offense? The offensive line. It wasn't McCaffrey. Why were they 3 for 12 on third down? They couldn't pick up a blitz to save their lives. Like, I think the offensive line issue is an issue when they face really good defenses who are tough up front. Most of the time they don't face defenses like that, but in the Super Bowl they did. When they faced the AFC North last year, they did, and I think that's when you see the Niners offensive line fall apart. And heaven forbid Trent Williams misses more than 2 games this year, because they're not equipped. They're 3-6 in the last 4 years when he misses games. They need him, and they know he's not going to play a full season.
Yeah, there's no question that you can have I would say most teams in pro football have a weak offensive lineman. I don't know that you can have 3/5 of your line being question marks. They get between Pooney, Drake Nugent, Kingston, Hubbard. They've got to find at least one starter. It's got, you drafted 2 guys, you signed 2 guys after the draft, you brought in a couple veterans, you got to find at least on your interior offensive line, Banks, Brendel, and Burford, Banks, Brendel, and Feliciano were fourth worst in the NFL, Pro Football Focus. So, you're not
And John
you're not going to
Feliciano
just
is the third
improve.
best offensive lineman. It's not good.
Right. I mean, he actually played at a real high level as the way he was graded out. But my whole point is just that if you're going to be one of the, 28th in the NFL as far as how your interior line is evaluated, well, guess what? I mean, that means that if you go after four, you had 4 to 5 or 6 offensive linemen in the offseason, one of those guys has got to be good enough to step in for Brendel, to step in for Feliciano, to step in for Burford, to step in for McKivitz. If you went this entire offseason, you don't have one offensive lineman that's ready to step in and contribute, that's not a good sign. So that's one of the things I'll be looking for starting this weekend. Or starting tomorrow, which is not just who's the ones, but who exactly are the twos in what spots, who are the threes in what spots on that offensive line, which young offensive lineman is closest to breaking through and actually starting. Because to me, Pooney looks to be a far better athlete than Burford or Feliciano and probably should be in the mix for right guard.
Larry, I'm disappointed in you. I'm disappointed in me. We did not name the 49ers number one concern. It's right in front of our faces. We both missed it. By far their number one concern this year, rest disadvantage. Rest disadvantage. That's it. I'm sorry.
minus 37 days to the Ravens.
For me. How are they ever going to make it to the playoffs? Larry, this was a hell of a show. Always appreciate you. It's 5:00 on the West Coast. Make sure you subscribe to Larry's channel and mine as well. Are you doing any more work today?
Not today. I'll be tomorrow in Santa Clara for a busy full day, but I've done enough for today. I may watch a little baseball tonight, maybe a little hoops.
One more concern for this team before we go, because it's 5:00. Health. I mean, it's kind of like a given in football, but it's an older team. They've played 60 games the last 3 years. They had relatively good luck with that last year. Trent's going to miss time. Debo's going to miss time. What if McCaffrey misses time too this year? They got kind of lucky with that. What if Brock misses time? You're not a big Josh Dobbs. Sorry.
It's Kittle. I mean, if you lose Kittle,
yeah.
Who is tight end 2 on this team? I mean, and I was saying they ought to go sign Robert Tonyan, and he signed with the Vikings. They don't have a tight end 2 of note on this team.
One more concern. Kyle's knowledge of the rule book.
Yeah.
Are there new rules this year? Did he learn them?
Well, and the return, it seems like if you caught the Niners on different days this offseason, they had different approaches to the new return rules. If you caught them on one day, hey, they're signing Trent Taylor and they're saying, hey, just catch the ball. Just catch the ball. Just don't fumble it. Just no negative plays there. And then you're looking at them going with Garendo and some of the speedsters, and it's like, well, wait a second. Maybe they're trying to make big plays on special teams. I think they haven't gotten their arms all the way around how they want to attack special teams. But that's going to be another factor, is the new return rules.
Well, Kyle, Larry and I will figure it out for you. We'll work it out. We'll tell you what to do because we're all over it.
That's right.
That's what we do. Larry, good show. Thank you very much, everyone, for watching. I'll be back tomorrow with my dad. Larry and I are going to be at OTAs tomorrow. There's practice.
So we'll be out there.
I'll be streaming later after that when we talk about, and there's going to be just a huge battle royale between content creators about how good was Ricky Pearsall in this practice. I am going to completely question someone's professionalism and reputation based on how they characterize Ricky Pearsall tomorrow. I can't wait. I'm going crazy.
He looks, Tony the Tiger, great.